So we're going to get right into what was indeed a busy week in the world of World Wrestling Entertainment. About 1 week ago, the transaction became official. TKO is now the new owner of WWE, and one of the things they decided to do this week, we talked about TV deals, and SmackDown is staying on Friday nights as of right now, but it will not be on Fox. Starting about 1 year from now, October 2024, USA Network, once again, will have SmackDown. It wasn't too long ago that SmackDown was on the USA Network as part of the Monday-Tuesday deal. As of right now, it appears that SmackDown is going to stay on Fridays, but it will now be on the USA Network. So WWE's time with a weekly national televised show on a major network that everybody gets and everybody knows is coming to an end in about a year. But also, though, part of this deal is that WWE will put on 4 special events throughout the calendar year on NBC on a Saturday night. I mean, a lot of people are thinking easily that could just be Saturday night main events coming back. I threw out the idea that obviously they said they wanted 4 big special events. I threw out the idea, what if those 4 special events were the 4 big pay-per-views? Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. What if they were the events? I wonder if that would then take away from Peacock subscriptions. But I guess by having them be the big events, it would maybe not take away from Peacock subscriptions necessarily, because you still have the other, 8 throughout the calendar year. As we've learned, pay-per-view in the world of pay-per-view has changed. WrestleMania used to be a $50 thing when minimum wage was $5.15 an hour, and with minimum wage in the United States being closer to, $20 an hour, more around 15. Pay-per-views are essentially free now, with free trials of Peacock and $9.99 a month, or even $5.99 a month. You can get your hands on Peacock in the United States and WWE Network elsewhere. So pay-per-views and the revenue stream when it comes to the, paying $50, $60 for this event is no more. So essentially, if these events were put on free television, outright free television, if anything, I imagine they would only make more money, because people like me and you, Brandon, I think, are not going to get rid of our Peacock subscriptions because there's still the other 8 pay-per-views. And we're not going to have Peacock for this month and not Peacock for that month. It's kind of too much of a hassle to get rid of it for the month of April, but then get it back in May in time for the next pay-per-view, especially when it's only $5, $6, $7, $10 a month. We might as well just keep it going straight through. So we'd still pay for the Peacock subscriptions. And then on top of that, I think WWE would make a ton of money with ad revenue for these huge events. Am I wrong there, Brandon, in thinking that?
No, you're not. You're not off base with it, and I agree too, because I believe the last time I paid for Peacock, I did the annual, and I think it was like $99.99. So $8 and change a month. That's
and a lot of people would do that annual, and then WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, SummerSlam would be on NBC. You know what I mean? So you'd get the both. You're not going to lose me as a Peacock subscriber for that kind of price.
No, here's the thing. Peacock has enough original content. Obviously they have their whole network. Obviously, there's enough original content that would keep me happy. The other part is too, I still think even if you missed it on NBC, you'll still be able to catch it later on Peacock. Is what I would expect, because not everybody can sit there and watch it on NBC. If it's the big 4 that's rumored out there. I do think that if you, say you miss it on a Sunday night, it'll be there kind of like how Hulu does it with Raws and SmackDowns, where it'll be available at 7 a.m. the next day or something. That's kind of where I think. So I don't think it would even take that big of a hit to the subscription base. I really don't.
Yeah, and obviously the ad revenue that they could get from having it on television. I mean, that's
here's the other thing too. So the deal that the WWE had with Fox, I believe, was reportedly $1 billion. This new contract that they're doing with the USA Network, NBC Universal, is upwards of $1.4 billion. So they're making more money. So at the end of the day, I think your suspicions are right. If NBC Universal is going to pay $400 million more than what Fox did, my thoughts are they're probably going to put some really big shows on the NBC network. So that I don't think you're too far off base with it. I feel like that's pretty legitimate. I feel like the WrestleManias, the Royal Rumbles, SummerSlams, obviously my favorite show at the end of the year, Survivor Series, those could be the 4 that they do it every year. and then they'll still have the other 8, shows each year plus whatever NXT puts out. It's all going to be fine. WWE's making a lot of money, and the sad thing is, and I'll say this kind of I guess tongue in cheek a little bit. Of course, all the releases would happen on my birthday, because my birthday, full disclosure, is September 21st, and I know you texted me that on my birthday. Great day. Great day for you. Maybe not so great for the WWE roster. So a little tongue in cheek. I hope all the best to all the superstars that got cut and everything. So obviously, I hope they all land on their feet. They're all making money in one way, shape, or form. But it was just it's been a weird week between the deal, wrestlers getting cut. Well, I mean, we're going to highlight some names here.
Well, and that's the thing too. Listen, there's kind of two folds to when the announcements are made. I can't necessarily show sympathy for some of the talent that have complained about the timing in regards to their personal situations. Meaning, I think like Top Dollar said that he got cut while he was bringing his kid to school or something like that. Listen. I can't fault WWE on those regards. There's always going to be something. There is no such thing as a perfect time. You know what I mean? They're not going to call you up and ask you what you're doing and then say, oh, you're taking your kid to school. Is there a part of your day that doesn't matter? Okay, give us a call back then. Give us a call back at 3 o'clock when you're not doing anything. There's not really like a good time. It goes back to the whole CM Punk getting fired on his wedding day.
I was just thinking.
Yeah. Listen, I don't think it's WWE's intention, right? Like, it's just things happen when they happen, especially with all these releases. You're taking your kid to school. That doesn't mean everyone's taking their kid to school. I get that. But where I can sympathize when it comes to timing is the announcement of WWE doing this big deal. And also this on the same day, which was the 21st, they made 2 announcements, the big deal television-wise and the Elimination Chamber Stadium show as well, and then made these announcements about the cuts. That's, I guess, the issues I had. I guess, I don't know how they could have done it better, but it's just, listen, there's 7 days in a week. So to have all 3 of those things happen essentially on one day, could you not done the cuts 2 days ago and then did the announcement? Could you not done the cuts Saturday? I get it, SmackDown's on Friday, but I mean, maybe you could have let him finish out the week, did the cuts on Sunday, like something like that.
Yeah, but it sucks too, though, because Emma, for example, obviously she's Australian, so obviously that kind of sucks for her because maybe she heard rumblings all along. I mean, maybe we'll hear it on a podcast that comes out because I don't know if you saw, but Mansoor and Massey they were on I believe a podcast this week after they got their termination letters from WWE, and they put out some really interesting content. It was I don't know if it was tongue in cheek per se, but it was they talked about Sami Zayn being annoying but harmless, and they were talking about Seth Rollins pretty much he just stays to himself kind of a thing, and then AJ Styles all he talks about is Georgia football, because obviously we know he's a Georgia Bulldog fan. It's I guess I kind of take it with a grain of salt because obviously they're not going to. I don't think they're going to completely diss guys that they would consider their former colleagues. I don't think, but I'm curious to see what Emma says later on because obviously she's Australian, and I feel like a person like her, even if it wasn't in a main event match, having her on the roster at that point for the big show would have probably been really cool for her personally. But obviously, at the end of the day, it's a business. This whole TKO thing, that's what happens when these mergers occur. As soon as we heard everything was in place, you knew that these cuts were happening. It wasn't to me, I wasn't surprised that it happened because this is what happens when mergers happen a lot of times because they want to cut the fat, and that's it. And that's, unfortunately.
I feel like WWE's always cut the fat, though. This whole thing of big mass days of releases, this isn't something new. WWE's done this before.
No. But the timing's weird, though, because of the whole merger and all that stuff that came out.
Yeah, and I think the last time, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think not maybe the last time, but one of the last times that cuts, I think specifically during COVID, right? Wasn't it during the COVID time where so. WWE was actually talking about how They were doing good despite COVID. They were actually making record revenue despite the fact that they had nobody in the crowds. Like merchandise sales were actually doing good, and then made the announcement of a bunch of people getting cut.
Yeah.
So it's very similar to like WWE making some sort of announcement that they did something great and they're making lots of money, and then doing that at the same time. With some of these cuts, listen, I understand, and the people who don't necessarily know wrestling, the cuts necessarily mean is right now they don't have anything for you. WWE treats people like independent contractors on their terms when they want them to be independent contractors. They don't treat them like independent contractors when they want them. When they want them, they want them here, they want them now, they want them exclusive, right? But in other situations, like when they're sitting there thinking, hey, we don't have any good storylines for you, so we don't want to necessarily pay you if we're not putting you to work. And what that means is essentially these people can all come back. I mean, we saw this with Bray Wyatt, right? We saw this in 2021 right before SummerSlam when he was released, and then in 2022 he made his return about a year later when they had stuff for him and they were thinking about what they could do with him, that kind of thing. So, the end of the day, this isn't even Top Dollar's first release this year, I think, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, we kind of talked about this. I mean, he's not being featured on pay-per-views. He's not really, he's a SmackDown guy. He's not in any feuds that were really
He's
taken
been
off.
essentially, he's been considered, to me, I would consider him almost a jobber when he was in WWE, because he was putting guys over, I feel like. So like anytime I saw him in recent like matches, like he wasn't winning the matches. He was trying to make the other competitor look good. I think he had a match with LA Knight recently, and like obviously his job was to put LA Knight over.
Yeah. So, like, I think the biggest things here, obviously, obviously Riddick Moss and Emma, right? That they are like a couple, so that's interesting. Dolph Ziggler's interesting because they've always not had things for him, but Dolph Ziggler to me has always been a very under the radar version of the Miz, right? I think he's survived all of these cuts in the past, despite the fact that he is not very prominently featured sometimes. He's just one of those people you think like the Miz. Like, for example, they're not cutting the Miz, right? Miz is in what, 2 storylines a year, right? They could easily. There's many Monday Night Raws and SmackDowns that go on without the Miz. There's many pay-per-views. Most pay-per-views go on without the Miz in some sort of storyline, but they're not getting rid of him because he has that kind of, I don't know, Homer kind of veteran quality. They like sticking around.
Well, he's the guy that I mean, you're a baseball fan just like I am. I call him the ultimate utility guy. Like if you need him to do something, he's a company guy through and through. And like,
but Dolph Ziggler's like that too, and that's why I'm surprised that he's getting released because he's like that. I'm actually surprised a lot too. Talking about Masay and Mansoor. I'm more surprised with Mansoor. Obviously, we all got introduced to him via his, the Saudi Arabia stuff, and them actually using him in those Saudi Arabia pay-per-views kind of specifically because of his heritage. When he's on pay-per-views that obviously no one had ever heard of him before until he was showing up on those pay-per-views. But because they still go to Saudi Arabia often, and because they still do that stuff, is surprising, that they are not just kicking them around just for that good PR when they go to Saudi Arabia, or the fact that they have somebody of Saudi Arabian descent, within the ranks. So for the PR perspective, I'm surprised they're not kicking him around and keeping him for that. Elias, I think Elias reminds me a lot of like the Bray Wyatt thing where like he's there, he can be used, you're just not using him. I don't know why, right? He's not doing anything wrong. You brought him back. You're putting him in a lot of these things, and then you're not doing anything with him, right? Whose fault is that? And Mustafa Ali is a big surprise to me because of the fact that he's right now in the middle of a storyline with Rey Mysterio. That's one of those ones that, right, could you have not, like, waited until he was done with, NXT or, the upcoming pay-per-view?
I'm not surprised by it, though. I'm not surprised by it with Ali because obviously Ali has been very contentious. He's had a contentious relationship with WWE for the last few years. Like he's like, remember he said he like pretty much stayed home for a while because he was like, I don't want to come back, and they're like, well, we're not going to release you. So it was like a weird dynamic for a bit, and then he came back. He's been doing stuff, and they probably figured at this point it was like, all right, time to part the seas. And then before we recorded. Really, another big name, came through on social media, and that's Matt Riddle. Like, I didn't expect that, to be honest with you. I felt like Matt Riddle. Yes, there's obviously, he's got he may have that baggage to him, because of the way he is, like, all the different stuff you see on social media. But from like his in ring and his total work perspective, I thought he was very over with the fans. I figured his merchandise hadn't been doing halfway decent because you'd see a lot of his shirts in the crowd. So like, it was very weird to see Matt Riddle go. I mean, I know I mean, obviously there's that recent situation at the airport. Like, there's been some weird things, but I thought he was one of those where I feel like he was almost, immune to it because he was still very popular, and I figured he'd still be around. So Matt Riddle to me was really surprising. I just wonder where he goes from here. Like, would he go? I mean, would he go back to UFC? I know it's kind of like, obviously, like the whole, the company situation, Endeavor, TKO, and all that. I wonder if him and Dana White could work something out, or does he go on the independents? Like, I'm so curious. Or AEW takes him. Like, obviously, like these superstars, AEW could obviously be a fit for all of them.
AEW, I could even see him, like an Impact. I think he could show up there. I think he'd be a pretty good fit for that. Down there. UFC is like football. I listen, I understand the whole Ronda Rousey thing. I heard about her, kind of having that itch to go back, but I think that's a tough one. That's like, a lot of people, like I said, like football, they come to WWE after they were just in football, right? You don't go back. It's kind of, WWE's kind of that safety. And UFC is one of those things that CM Punk learned very close, that you have to be a UFC guy. It's not just that easy. It's not easy at all. In fact, it's very difficult. So somebody like Matt Riddle, who has been out of it for a few minutes, I don't know if the possibility to get back in the shape to do that.
I never say never, though, because he's still in great shape. I'm sure he still practices all of his disciplines that got him to the UFC in the first place. But I get your point.
CM Punk was in great shape, and he was obviously training for a long time before. But it's
okay. Hold on. Back up a second. CM Punk was like I forget what the belt he was. He wasn't even a black belt in any like discipline. Like, he wasn't, to me, like he was like
getting in fight shape, I guess, is the best way. I mean, it would take, I would say this much: if Matt Riddle went back to UFC, it would take a year. It would take a year.
Well, yeah, I don't know what the rules are on doping, because obviously he had the whole drug testing situation. So I don't know what the rule. I don't know how UFC's rules are on what they do, because I know they're pretty strict because they follow a lot of rules when it comes to doping. So like, I don't know how that would work for him.
And now here's a question that we didn't really bring up at all, and it's very curious, right? You talk about UFC, right? Well, who owns UFC? Right? Who essentially fired Matt Riddle, right? It wasn't WWE. It's TKO, right? Okay. Who would have to hire him to be in the UFC? TKO. That's the ownership, right? Spot.
Maybe he goes to Bellator, though. You know what I mean? Like, Bellator could be a fit, because you've seen guys that, like, UFC, just like, they're done with them in UFC, but like they go make money in Bellator. Because how I look at Bellator is, I look at Bellator, like, so I think of UFC, I think of WWE, and then when I think of AEW, I think of Bellator, if you want to like put it from like wrestling, sports entertainment, and MMA. So like a lot of these individuals, if they've run their course in UFC, Bellator is not a bad landing spot.
And I'm not saying too that his time in UFC is for sure not possible, because I don't know how that relationship is. I just think that obviously it's more unique to think about now, or not. I'm not just saying his relationship personally with UFC. I'm just generalizing and saying, with this, UFC and WWE now under the same umbrella, I don't necessarily know what that means for any people, talent, whether it's broadcasters, whether it's UFC to WWE, WWE to UFC, ring crew, whoever. I just don't know how that necessarily works being under one umbrella. Like, if you were to be fired from WWE, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know how it works if you get fired from, let's say, working from, the state you live in. You live in New York State. You get fired as a New York State employee, as a New York State police officer. Can you get hired as a New York State, conservation officer? Like, are you then kind of looked at differently because of that? Because again, like, you're an employee of one thing. So I don't know how that necessarily works. I don't know. If Dana White, let's say Dana White's in a great relationship with Matt Riddle, is he allowed to swoop him up with this new ownership situation of, him being?
I'm sure. Here's the thing. I'm sure if Dana White wants somebody, Dana White will get that person. Like, Dana White's a hell of a businessman and a negotiator. I feel like if him and Riddle like somehow made amends, because all reports out there. I don't think there's anything out there stating that they have a good relationship or any relationship at this point, to my knowledge at least. So, but if Dana White wants somebody, he'll get that somebody. That's just how he is. And here's the thing though, with all the mergers and everything, with the the UFC Endeavor, this whole merger would make it as a wonder under the umbrella of TKO. Like there's a lot of reports going on out there that there's 3 superstars that Edge's contract's up at the end of the month reportedly. Drew's contract's up right around WrestleMania time reportedly in 2024, and then LA Knight's, I think he's got about a year and a half left on his contract. But it sounds like contract negotiations with these 3, as well as Becky Lynch, supposedly are they're not close on money at this point. Like for me, like I'm just curious, to get your perspective on it because I mean, can you sign everybody? Like, are you prioritizing like which ones you want? Like, do you see any of these guys and gals not coming back?
I don't foresee anything really mattering too much yet. Like we're talking about, WrestleMania, a year and a half, things like that. I think at those times they're going to look at it at those times. I think, AEW isn't enough of a threat. There really isn't a company out there that is enough of a threat to lock these people in early. They're going to see where they are with Drew McIntyre when they make that decision. I think with LA Knight, they're going to see where they are. Because to be honest with you, LA Knight probably needs WWE. I understand he's hot right now. I think it has a lot to do with him being in WWE. I don't think if LA Knight goes to AEW, I think that thing cools right down and he's just back to being what he was. Because, I mean, he's been in every company on planet Earth. He's been in Impact. He's been in NWA. He's been all these places before. So I think his popularity is right now as LA Knight with his catchphrases in WWE. So he needs WWE. And like you said, it's a little bit of ways. And I get WWE's trepidations about the situation because his popularity has come on as of late. So, to sign him to like these like long-term deals, when his contract isn't nearly up yet, like, okay, let's see where we are at the time. Okay, let's see where we are more closer to the contract being up. It's the same, we talked about with MJF and his big contract situation. WWE doesn't need to look at him or any of that stuff until the time comes and they can see where they can pencil him in and see what kind of feuds they would have for him on the horizon, that kind of thing.
But hey, I will tell you this though. There is one superstar wrestler that is going the other route, which AEW to WWE is being reported, which is Jade Cargill. She checks all the boxes. And WWE recently filed the trademark Jada Parker, I believe it was. And it sounds like people are putting 2 and 2 together, reading between the tea leaves. And it sounds like she's going to bypass, if it's official, she's going to bypass NXT and go right to the main roster. And she's going to get a massive push is what.
Yeah, I can't see why she wouldn't just go right to the main roster.
Yeah.
I will say one thing, talking about a lot of these releases and stuff, and it made me kind of think in the baseball terminology. If WWE had a union, if these guys had a union, I really feel like that it would probably be tied into like similar to what we're used to with like DFAs and baseball, where like these guys wouldn't necessarily be outright released as they would be probably DFA'd in the sense of you're going back to NXT, and you're taking a pay cut to go back to NXT. Or you can ask for your release. You can either go to NXT under the NXT, because I'm just used to with baseball, right? Major League Baseball, you don't got room for these guys, so they DFA them. They essentially say you're going to the minors, and then they have 11 days to report to the minors, and if they don't report, then they're free to walk. If they do report, they report, and they're back, they're on the minor league pay and the minor league stuff. So I feel like if WWE had a union, I feel like that would be kind of something they would throw in there. Like if you're going to release somebody, you gotta, in certain circumstances, designate them for an opportunity to like take a pay cut down at NXT first before you just outright release them. I mean, I guess you could release NXT people outright because we saw some of these names that got released from NXT, and there's really nowhere else that you could put them. I guess you could say I'll DFA you to just be going to the Performance Center and not being on television and getting, I don't know what kind of check WWE hands out to people who aren't on television, who are just like at the Performance Center, like let's say like Jade Cargill right now, right? What kind of checks is she getting for just showing up and working out every day? I don't know. But I guess you could do that with NXT people. You could just send them back to developmental, to the full developmental, like no television. But they don't have a union. So, yeah, they just get released when they don't have anything for them, and then they'll get hired back. And that's the thing, too. Like we talk about the Drew McIntyres. And this is why I don't like to speculate where we're going to be post-WrestleMania, because we were just speculating about Drew McIntyre a few months ago, and here he is back in WWE, at Money in the Bank. He made his return. And, hey, you know what? Maybe come WrestleMania time or post-WrestleMania time, they are releasing Drew McIntyre. He is leaving because they're bringing back Elias because they got something big for him. So, we learned Mustafa Ali, like we talked about, he's in the middle of a feud right now, and they're releasing him. So to worry about where Drew McIntyre, LA Knight will be in over a year or about a year's time is kind of a waste because, for what we know, who knows if LA Knight cools off at the, between now and the Royal Rumble. Yeah, they could be very far on money and maybe even being like, no, we're good kind of thing. And if Drew McIntyre, they might just say, yeah, we're good. We don't disrespect you, but yeah, you know what? You want money, but at the same time, we don't have anything for you that we can think of. So how about this? Why don't you go test the waters, go to AW for a while. And then when we think of something and your contract ends there, we'll bring you back and we'll give you that. So it's not like sports where you have to lock someone up. It's not like, hey, if you don't offer me this money, I'm going to go here. They're more like, yeah, okay, well, you can go there if you want. I mean, we're not going to stop you, kind of thing.
But here's the thing, though. I disagree with that because I do think if you don't lock these superstars up, then they will go to the other competition. Like it doesn't to me. That's how I look at it. Like I think a guy like Matt Riddle, like why wouldn't Matt Riddle go to like AEW? Like why wouldn't he? Because if Tony Khan sees enough of him as a character and like you've seen it, like AEW's brought in guys. The list is long, obviously, of former wrestlers from WWE. But like even he's even given Roderick Strong some run right now with the whole Adam Cole saga with MJF. So like. And plus Tony Khan has, literally billions of dollars to say, oh, yeah, whatever, I can waste money and just, hey, Matt, I want you to wrestle a couple times a year. Or like, he'll have him on here or there. Because here's the thing. AEW has a bloated roster already. We've talked about that numerous times. But I don't think Tony Khan really cares because he wants to have all the toys. And then when he feels like using them, then he just takes toys out of the toy chest and uses them.
But you brought up a great point with Matt Riddle going to AEW. Clearly, WWE doesn't care he goes to AEW. They're not even trying to keep him. They're actually showing him the door. They're saying, you're not welcome here, like for now.
Well, look at Cody Rhodes, though.
Right?
Look at Cody Rhodes, though. Cody Rhodes bet on himself. He made himself into a megastar in AEW. And then WWE was pounding out, like they told the story where Vince McMahon flew to, his house to come get him after, not that long back. He asked for his outright release. So for me, how I look at these superstars are a lot of these releases. I feel like a lot of these guys and gals that are being released by WWE, they're gonna have a chip on their shoulder and say, okay, I'm gonna go to AEW, I'm gonna go to Impact, I'm gonna kick some ass. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna try to use that Cody Rhodes model to a degree. Obviously, they're not gonna be EVPs and all that stuff, and then they can rebuild themselves up. Drew McIntyre's already done it. Like Drew McIntyre, before he came back, he was in every other brand that was in WWE, built himself up, won a championship. So anybody that's released, you don't pack up your lunch and say, you feel sorry for yourself. You know what you do? Okay, you dust yourself off when your time is, when you're ready to go back on the market and start wrestling independent shows or AEW, Impact, New Japan, NWA. Your goal at that point is, that chip on your shoulder says, okay, I'm gonna go kick ass wherever I go, and then I'm gonna have Vince, well, not Vince, but I'm gonna have TKO begging me to come back, and they're gonna fly.
And you know what's funny? The way that you say that, though, the way that you say that sounds more like that's a good strategy for how WWE should run things than the people themselves running things. Because if I was WWE right now, I would be doing exactly that. I would say, let's get rid of Matt Riddle. Let's get rid of Elias. And then if somebody came to me and said, what if they go do what Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes did? I would say, I'm hoping they go do that because then we'd have a reason to bring it back. They're not, Cody Rhodes, right? If he stayed in WWE, wasn't going to do what he did. He helped WWE by leaving because he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't going to do anything. He was going to stagnate. He left. He had a chip on his shoulder. He redeveloped himself, and then WWE had somebody worth bringing back. Same with Drew McIntyre, right? So if any of these people go and do that, good, right? Jade Cargill doing that down in AEW, right? If Jade Cargill would have started in WWE, it wouldn't have been good. She went and made herself And Tony Khan helped. Obviously, they all did that, and making Jade Cargill what she was at AEW, making her worthy of WWE wanting her. WWE, they do make a few people, and they've done that, but they're not also against taking some already made people. Why not, right? That's why they let The Rock go do those movies, right? Back in the day, they let The Rock use the name because they're like, hey, the bigger star you become, the bigger it's going to be when you come back here and wrestle for us. It's a win-win. So,
Well, of
hey,
course.
Elias, if you go to AEW and become their world champion and make yourself huge, great. Because then when you come back, we'll put you right in the main event picture and you'll
Well,
be somebody.
of
It'll be
course
great.
that's the thing. Of course, I mean, of course WWE's hoping that, but at the same time, the whole point of this is, you're probably going to see the end of the road for some of these superstars, especially the ones that, like, honestly, I was looking through the list and I'm like, okay, I haven't really heard of this person, that person. But hey, maybe they could be a diamond in the rough. Maybe they have a chip on their shoulder and say, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else and make myself a star. Of course, what WWE wants that, because at the end of the day, you had a guy who was Stardust in WWE or Dashing Cody Rhodes, which, whatever, those characters were what they were. He comes back a handful of years later. Now he's on the same level, based on WWE's internal roster, where they're like, okay, if Roman Reigns can't be here tonight, we got to have Cody. Like, that's good for the business. Like, I know it sucks for these individuals that are being released, obviously, because they lost their job. But if they use this energy and just reboot and refresh, and they just go grind, it'll be good for the business, because then they have a chip on their shoulder. Wherever they go next, they're kicking ass, and then that's gonna make the product over at that company better. And then maybe at some point they can tell WWE to pounce out, because, hey, you know what? AEW helped me build me up into the star that I thought I should have been all along. Why would I abandon them? So it's, to me, I think it's no, that's, I think that's true, because why would Kenny Omega, like, for example, why would he re-up with AEW? Because instead of, he didn't even listen to WWE. Like, there's people like, oh, he kicked the tires on WWE, but the thing is, he still stayed in AEW because I think he's loyal, and I think, like, guys like that, the Young Bucks, for example, Hangman Adam Page,
yes.
they're those dudes. I'm sure there's a few ladies in the locker room they're AEW through and through. But at the end of the day, like, even if WWE calls them, they may be like, well, I wouldn't have been in the position where WWE is calling me if it wasn't for AEW. I'm going to see if Tony Khan can at least match or give me a fair offer, and maybe I'll just stay here. So there's a lot of things going on in the background. But at the end of the day, if these released superstars have that chip on their shoulder, they make themselves better, that's going to make wrestling in general, for all the different promotions that get these different individuals, so much better. And as wrestling fans, who doesn't want that?
Well, I will say, when you talk, there are a few people, right? There are the Kenny Omegas of the world, right? But we've already seen it with a few of these people on this list, right? Emma's been released from WWE before, right? Shelton Benjamin's been released from WWE before. Top Dollar has been released from WWE before. They did, and I think Massey, right? All of Retribution. During COVID, he was released then too, right? So these guys have all been released before from WWE, and they didn't tell WWE to kick rocks because they all came back. I would say, in terms of, like, Emma, I feel like WWE's, brought her back a few times and tried to do their things with her. I don't really know what they can do with her. It's not necessarily Emma's fault. It's a little bit of mix of both. I don't think she really gets over that well in the WWE.
She did it when she came back. It wasn't like it was like a barely a pop, if anything, when she came back. It wasn't like on the Richter scale, you know what I mean? So, like, I think right then and there, like, WWE was like, okay, if she gets a pop, okay, maybe we'll run with her. When it wasn't, like, it barely registered on the scale, or, like, I don't even think there was really a pop anyways. Then at that point they're like, well, she's, I guess, that didn't work, and then pretty much she was kind of like that. Her push was essentially halted completely at that point, because if the fans, like, didn't see her for a bit, she comes back, does the match, when she comes to the ring, there's not much excitement for somebody who's been on a WWE for a little bit. Like, to me, it's like, okay, well, maybe Emma isn't the right move, and we'll probably just tell her to kick the bucket and see you later, and, like, let her go back to Impact or whatever. So, I mean, that stuff happens. I mean, it's unfortunate, because I think Emma's a case of, she's a good wrestler, but for some reason, she's not developing that connection with the WWE Universe. And last time I checked, the WWE Universe, believe it or not, a lot of people don't believe this, but if you boo the hell out of somebody really good, or you cheer the hell out of somebody, the higher ups like that. If you don't do anything, they're going to tell those people to kick the bucket, kick rocks, and get the hell out of here.
I don't know if they're going to tell him to kick the bucket. I think that's referring to killing him or death, but I don't know if they'll tell him that.
Well, kick the bucket, get out of whatever, kick the rocks.
So quickly, then, out of these people, because we talked about Cody Rhodes, we talked about Drew McIntyre, out of these people, which ones do you think have the potential? Let's see, WrestleMania 40 is coming up. WrestleMania 44, any of these people going to be main eventing WrestleMania 44? That were just released, right? In the same vein as Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes, who went and redefined themselves outside of WWE. I would probably say your best bet, if you were to pick anybody on this list, would be, I don't know, Dolph Ziggler. I mean, I don't know if it's too late for him. But, yeah. I mean, Davicato's a big dude. He could come back and be like Omos, I guess.
Yeah, but Riddle, for example, he's had his issues, but I feel like he's one of those dudes where I feel like WWE is like going to be like, all right, like behind the scenes, like, all right, Matt, like this is what you need to do to get yourself back in our good graces and earn your spot back. Like I feel like him and WWE have some sort of private thing going on where they're like, all right, like, yeah, we got to cut you, but like we really like you, but you need to, X, Y, Z, whatever the case is. And then maybe we come back. And he's the kind of guy that like, if he can, check those boxes, I don't think WWE would hesitate to bring him back. But at the same time, when his contract is essentially ended, where he his non-compete is, once that expires, he could just say, you know what, whatever, he could just go to AEW or go to New Japan, because maybe his style could work in New Japan. I feel like, for example, I feel like he could be a guy that would, he might want to do something like that possibly, So I mean, we'll see what happens with him, but yeah, I mean, Ziggler, Riddle, those are the ones that, obviously at the top of the list. I'm curious to see what Mustafa Ali is going to do. I'm curious. I could see him in Impact. I feel like he'd be pretty good there. So there's going to be landing spots. It's going to be curious to see where these individuals go, like Moss, Emma. I could see Moss and Emma going to Impact. I think that's kind of an obvious destination for them. So it's going to be interesting to see how these folks bounce back after, getting their WWE, I'm just going to say it, the WWE, contract kicked the bucket, because their career in the WWE is unfortunately, it's, pardon the expression, but it's dead in the water at this point, because their contract's up. So they are no longer a member of the WWE roster. Now they're in the alumni section.